we know there's somebody out there that knows something. Um, Even if it could, even anonymously, if someone was afraid of coming forward in naming somebody that was involved, we just want to know. We just would like to know where she is and have her back.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to True Crime Unsolved. I'm Miles Reef, and I'm here as always with my buddy Sean Cahill. This is the place where we tackle the stories that the TV networks won't touch. Unsolved homicides, missing persons cases, stories without an ending. Sean, what are we getting into today?
Hey, Miles. So today we're going to be meeting Rex and Lisa Brueggeman. They're the parents of Kirsten Brueggeman, who disappeared after a night out with some acquaintances in 2021. There's a case breakdown that we put up last week covering Kirsten's case that gives pretty much the ins and the outs of it in a general nutshell sense. So if you're not familiar with Kirsten or her story, I would start there. There's going to be a link in the description and in the playlist. Otherwise, if you've already seen it, now I would watch this, right? So Kirsten's parents, Rex and Lisa, are really wonderful people. We had a good chat with them, and they really told us a lot of detail about this story that's not in the case breakdown. Things about Kirsten's past, her current life, what we know about what happened the night she disappeared, and also what we don't know and what we're still looking for, as well as the current state of the case and where things may be starting to head. So I don't want to beat around the bush too much. I think we should hop right in. So let's bring you guys straight to Rex and Lisa Brueggeman.
Rex, Lisa, thank you so much for jumping on with us today. We really, really appreciate it, and it's good to see you. Why don't we just start with you guys just kind of introducing yourselves, tell us who you are, and then we can kind of jump into it.
I'm Lisa Brueggeman, and I'm Kirsten's mom.
I'm Rex Brueggeman, and I am Kirsten's father.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both for taking the time to be here with us today. We had a nice long phone call with you, as you know, and so we wanted to basically go through a lot of the stuff that we talked about, maybe in a little bit more detail, and just learn about Kirsten, who she was, and what the situation here is, because it's certainly very puzzling, and you guys are living in it. So let's talk a little bit, I guess, first about Kirsten. So in order to understand what happened, I think we got to kind of get to know your daughter a little bit. So why don't you tell us a little bit about who she was and where she was in her life in 2021?
Well, she was 26 at the time. Kirsten was a funny, um, loved animals, was very stubborn. Um, there was a situation when she was little. We were out at dinner and a friend was babysitting, and the friend kind of scolded her for something, and she went under a table and sat there for pretty much the entire time. She didn't come out. She didn't do anything. She just sat there. And that's kind of how she was. I mean, she was very, very strong and opinionated on a lot of things. She and I did things, usually around her spring breaks. We would go someplace not very far, St. Louis, Cincinnati, uh, those kind of places. And she was smart. She had her issues in school, but she ended up uh, being on the honor society, in the honor society. But she also had her issues. She had problems with anger, and she had, like I said, she was stubborn and kind of secretive with us throughout her high school years and on.
Well, I pretty much agree with everything that Lisa said. She did have a good sense of humor. She was pleasant to be around when she was in a good mood, but she could have her times when she wasn't so pleasant to be around. She was very, very independent. And Lisa and I, to be honest, probably had different philosophies on parenting, unfortunately. That's one thing. I tended to be a little more strict than she was, or that she wanted to be. I'm not sure that had any effect on her, other than that she may not have been getting consistent disciplined, but I guess I'm not going to play pop psychologist here, but she was a decent gal. I think she got in with some people that may have influenced her in a negative way. We found out later that she had started smoking marijuana at like 13 years old. And I think that may have had an effect on her and her personality. I think she saw herself as kind of an outsider. A lot of the guys and gals that she hung around with were a little kind of a little edgy, and this is in high school that I'm talking about. In grade school, she was a pretty good student. She was a good student, and nothing too remarkable there, other than getting into some minor trouble once in a while for talk, and that was usually her biggest problem. She would quiet down in school when she should have. But yeah, in high school, I noticed kind of a change with her, and like Lisa said, she was pretty opinionated about things. I couldn't talk to her about politics very well. That didn't go over too good with her, with my opinions. Now she was a little closer uh, in her political thinking and social issues with her mother than me. But all in all, she could be a very pleasant gal to be around, and she did love animals. And I have some very fond memories of her when she was younger. Going to the park or going camping or whatever we did on vacation. And she was probably, if I'm honest, closer to her mother than me. But I thought we had a pretty good relationship. It got strained at times, during those adolescent years. But
Well, it comes with the territory, unfortunately,
yeah,
I think
I
for a
think
lot
so.
of.
Yeah, I wanted to say, you guys are sort of describing most people, right? Like, they were smart. They got into high school. They started hanging out with a couple of, people that maybe sent them in the wrong direction, and there was some trouble. I mean, if you interviewed my parents, I mean, it wouldn't be too far off from
well,
what you're talking about. So I know I'm curious why that's where you guys went, I'm wondering if you do feel like this path that she took that maybe was a little bit, steering her wrong, somehow intersects with what happened to her and why she's gone missing, and if that's why we started talking about that when we asked you about her.
Yes, I believe it did. Part of the problem, I think, with Kirsten was she always thought that she would be able to talk her way or get out of any situation. She wasn't afraid. Um, at the time, well, at one point, both of us were probation officers. And, I would talk to her about, that there are a lot of people out there that are not very good, and that they look at, trying to get to you or harm you. And unfortunately, I think she just felt like, as I think that a lot of kids do, that she was invincible, that she was going to, anything that she was in, she would be able to get out of. And like I said, her drug use, her marijuana use, and especially her drinking ended up getting her into some trouble pretty much right after high school. And she got in trouble. She was arrested a few times, put on probation, put on home detention, and still, I think, thought that she could get by with a lot of stuff. And unfortunately, I think that the night she went missing, we're fairly certain that she was intoxicated and maybe, using other drugs. And I think that that led her to a situation where, unfortunately, there was something she couldn't get out of.
So you think it's sort of a question of her judgment?
That's just what I was going to say.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it affected her judgment.
Yep.
And
not necessarily that she was hanging around the wrong people and that's why harm came to her, but just that she had bad judgment when she was under the influence. And
right.
Yeah.
And the wrong people were a symptom of that, basically. She wasn't judging that either, right? Like, right.
Yeah. Well, listen, what you guys said, I think, you go through that when you're a kid, right? But as you get into your 20s, the expectation is that you start to figure things out, right? And, so it makes sense, but, when you put it in that context that she was having, trouble with getting arrested and stuff like that and home detention as she got older, it makes sense.
I would say this: it's not like we're trying to blame her for her going missing or what happened. It's just by way of explanation what happened.
Yeah, no, I think context is really important. Well, where was she in her life around this time period? Like, what was going on with her?
Well, I mean, she was still living with us at that time, because she'd been on home detention, and she was off home detention at that point, but hadn't been off for very long. And actually, still, she was on probation in another county for one of those offenses. So she was still under the court's jurisdiction, but that was during COVID. And a lot of things were so different then. I, at that point, was no longer working with probation, but I do know that even at that time, the way probation worked changed a lot. They didn't have people reporting in as much. It was more phone conversations and things like that. And so I think that, she was able to get by with some stuff that maybe if things had not been like in that time of COVID, maybe she wouldn't have. Like I said, although she was living here, there was a long period of time that she wasn't working because the restaurant that she worked wasn't open. It had just reopened just a few months before she went missing. And I think, unfortunately, she thought, things were so boring that once things started easing up a little bit, she was ready to get back out there.
She pulled out all the stops trying to make up for lost time. That was my opinion too. But again, this isn't to blame her. She did not deserve to go missing. And I mean, we pretty much think someone probably abducted her or grabbed her. We're not sure. We don't know that, but again, I'm not trying to blame her for what happened or saying that she deserved this in any way, because no one deserves to go missing. It's a horrible thing that we've been through, and I never thought I'd be in this place. But,
of course. Well,
yeah, and Rex, I think we're super grateful for your honesty, and I think the audience will be as well. And I don't think anyone's going to take it that way. You're just putting it all on the table.
Yeah, one show that was done about us, they kind of left all that out. Some of the problems we had with her, and I did not want to paint a picture of her as this innocent angel that just got caught up in something bad and went disappearing, because she was just like any other young person in this day and age that had problems, and unfortunately got in with drinking and drugs. To what extent, we don't know, but I'm pretty sure she had a problem.
Yeah.
Well, and how are you going to solve anything? How is there going to be a chance of actually figuring things out if you don't have all the facts out, right?
Well, right. A lot of speculation on our part.
Right. But I think, and you guys are both law enforcement, so you probably
Yeah,
have a better understanding of that than anyone.
And I think that's probably, I mean, to our detriment
yeah, in
because
some way, yeah.
you know, and I had we were very fortunate. We've had a lot of friends and family who supported us during this time. Um, and always want to say, keep the hope up, keep the faith up. Um, especially early on that, she would turn up. But, you know, being in the system the way we were, we kind of know how these things work. And it it's so when you have that little bit of hope, but the greater part of you knows that something awful more than likely happened to her.
There's a lot of bad actors out there, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, yeah, it is true. So I think in order to understand that, maybe we should talk a little bit about the 24 hours kind of like leading up to the last time you saw her and then after that, right? So, take us through, her day before this night, and then maybe we can jump into your guys' heads the day you found out she was missing and everything that happened from there. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Well, the day she went missing, it was actually January 1st of 2021. And she was set to work at this restaurant, pizza restaurant, late afternoon to or mid afternoon to their closing time. She didn't have a car at that time. She had totaled her car, and so I was a lot of times I was taking her back and forth to work, but she came at that time. We have a basement in our house, and that's where she was kind of staying. It gave her a little bit more privacy. She came up and basically said she'd already called for an Uber, that I didn't need to take her. Um, we hugged each other, and the Uber showed up, and she left, and I was prepared to actually go pick her up that night. And she called me, and because a lot of times I would ask her to bring home a pizza. I'd say ask her to have a pizza ready when I picked her up. And when I texted her that, she said that she was going out and meeting friends, that I didn't need to pick her up. And so I didn't. And later on, it got later, and went to bed. But there was something. I had actually texted her at one point and asked her if she was set due to work the next day, and she texted me back yes, that she was. And this was, I don't know, around 11 o'clock that night or so. And I said okay. Went to bed, kind of fell asleep, but woke up somewhere around 12:15, 12:30, and something just hit me. um, so I tried texting her, and she didn't respond. I tried calling her the phone, and I could tell the phone was shut off because it went instantly to voicemail. And I kept doing that over and over for a while. It was then I kind of woke Rex up and let him know that I just had this horrible feeling that there was something wrong. And so we were pretty much up the rest of that night, with nothing. Then, I mean, I still tried the texting and the calling, and still there was no response.
Was that unlike her, because you said that she had some troubles and probably had been out before, hanging out later than you wanted. And like, was this an experience you had, or what was different about this?
I don't know. It was just, all I can say, like I've said from the beginning, mother's intuition. It
Right.
just, it just felt like there was something different. Because yes, there'd been other times, but I think, I don't know. There'd been times that the one thing is she generally kept in contact with me. She would text me. If she didn't call me, she would usually text me. Um, but like I said, there, when I realized that the phone was off, I mean, my first thought was, okay, her battery went dead. But then I'm thinking, she usually always takes, her charger with her. And so that if she was somewhere, like let's say it had stopped, that if she had gone to someone's house or was with someone, that she would have been charging it. But it never ever came back online after that.
And had she told you that she planned to Uber home that night? Do you remember?
She just said she'd be get her own way home, and so
She
that,
figured.
yes, that's what I took it, is that she would Uber home.
Right. So the dead phone is doubly kind of alarming there, obviously, because you need that working. So what happens next?
Well, the later on that day, um, I end up calling her work to find out, because I wasn't sure what time she was scheduled. And I talked to the manager, and I just explained to her that I wasn't sure where she was, and asked her, I said, if she comes into work, would you make sure she contacts me? And she said she would. And it was at that point that I also kind of broke down and called Eddie. Um, Eddie was her on again, off again boyfriend. And I knew from what she had told me the night before that she was there with him and some other people. Um, and I had his, well, I didn't, I guess I did have his phone number. He's had so many phone numbers, it's hard to keep track of him, but I had his phone number at the time and was able to call him and ask him if he knew where Kirsten was. And that's when he kind of explained to me that what had happened the night before was they were all at a bar. Um, Kirsten had been drinking before she got there, and at some point during the time that they were there at the bar, she actually got sick in the bar. They they were ready to the bar was ready to close and told them they needed to leave, and they talked about going to a bowling alley, and Kirsten wanted to go, and Eddie said, no, you're not going with us. He was with another guy and two girls along with Kirsten, who had just met up with them at this bar. The one girl who was driving, her name was Olivia. She said, well, she can go with us. And I guess Eddie said, no, you're not. She's not. She's too drunk. And about that time, from what Eddie said, Kirsten started kind of hitting on the car, and Olivia, afraid that something was going to, that she was going to damage the car, ended up driving off. And they left her there outside the bar.
Was she familiar with this bar in this neighborhood? Like, was this, in your part of town where she was living, or is this sort of the opposite of that?
She was a little bit familiar because Eddie at the time had been working at a restaurant just down the street, and I think that's where he'd gone a few times. Mother lived, and his mother, and he lived just a few blocks away as well. I don't think it was necessarily her hangout place. I don't know that she ever had one place, but she was familiar with the area because of that. It's about 5 miles south of us here.
Got it. Yeah, I'm just trying to get a clear picture because obviously with the phone possibly not working or out of batteries and then being sort of abandoned there by everybody she's with, how familiar she is with the place and the area becomes important, right?
Right, right.
So, okay, Miles, do you have anything there, or do you want to keep moving through? Yeah, well then let's keep going. So her friends, or well, the people she was with, I should say, take off. Here she is outside of this bar where they've all been asked to leave. Do you have any idea roughly what time this is?
We think it was between 12 and 12:30 sometimes at some.
Okay, that makes sense. So this is where things probably start to go a little bit dark, right? And we only know of her movements from cameras. Is that correct?
Right. And I should say, what I also did was I called the bar itself to ask them if they had, if kind of explaining again the situation that I knew that Kirsten had been there. Um, did they know anything about what happened?
You called them the next day, or
Yeah,
it
the
was
next day.
like
Well,
that night?
no, it was the
Didn't
next.
specify.
And what I found out was they did have cameras, but the owner was actually out of town, so they couldn't okay me to, or anything. They got a hold of him, and he went through it, and this is where we kind of got thrown off at one point, because at one point he sees that there's a female who gets into a car that has either like like Uber or Lyft on it. Um, so then we thought, okay, so she at least got into, she was got a ride somewhere. Um, Come to find out later, he was looking at the wrong person, but he was able then to track her. She walked around where the restaurant bar is, down a side alley, which leads between some businesses, and there's a Kroger store there, and then a bowling alley toward the back, which was a different bowling alley than where they were allegedly going. But he had camera footage of her walking that way towards that bowling alley, and that's where uh, that's where everything stopped, because we didn't have anything after that until we got the police involved.
Got it. So
When did you
go ahead.
guys? Oh, sorry, Sean. I was just going to ask, when did you guys get the police involved?
That would have been Sunday, because the first was on a Saturday. On Sunday morning at about, I don't know, 5:30 is when I thought, okay, I'm going to, because we had gotten a call the night before from the restaurant that she had not turned up. She didn't show up for her shift, which, the one thing that Kirsten was she had a very strong work ethic. And so I was pretty sure that even if she had, let's say, gone somewhere and stayed with someone overnight, that she would have gone to work. And when she didn't go to work, we talked about whether we should call, and then thought, well, let's wait a little bit. And finally, it was again about 5 or 5:30 Sunday morning. At that time, I called the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department, because that's in the area where we last knew she was. But I was from there when they started asking me questions, and they asked where she lived, and I told her we lived in a little city just outside of Indianapolis called Lawrence. She told me I needed to call the Lawrence Police Department. So I then called the Lawrence Police Department, and they sent an officer out here to get information, take things down, who then told us that, that this information would go to the detectives on Monday morning, the following morning. And so we waited throughout that day. And then the next day, later in the morning, I called the Lawrence Police Department and talked to the detective that had first looked at the case, who then told me because of where she went missing, they were referring it to the Indianapolis Police Department. So we lost some time there in that
bureaucratic shuffling there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm so sorry. That's so frustrating.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It really is.
It's like a horrible nightmare real life version of being on the customer service line where they keep transferring you back and forth. I'm so sorry.
What was your general experience with them once things got going?
Well, when we found out again that it went to the Indianapolis, I called them and I was told that they had assigned a detective to it. And asked, I got her name and number, and we called her, and she was very nice. But again, of course, she had almost literally just gotten the case and hadn't really looked through much of anything, and said that she wanted to look through what she had, took our number and everything. And then she called us back later to ask us more questions and said she would start an investigation. And
at what point was it? I kind of forget myself that I have to ask Lisa, how long was it from when she went missing till we had that meeting with her down at her office?
That was about the following Thursday or Friday.
Okay, so it was
wow,
a few days later.
She invited us to come down and talk to her.
But in the meantime, she had gone around to, she had gone first to this bar where Kirsten had been and was able to get the camera footage video, and from there watched it and saw kind of the direction Kirsten was going, and started going up and down the street to businesses that were in the area looking for more video. I think she'd done all that before we met with her back then. And, she had been able to get some more video of her shortly after she would have left the bar area, going down this street, Shortridge, and talk about how she was walking.
Well, she was headed south on Shortridge Road, which was just, I don't know, like a block and a half east of where the bar was at. And she walked pretty normally. I mean, she had a backpack on. You can see it in the video. She walked south, but we don't know how far down she got. But she looked just like she was walking normally, and it was clearly her. And then there was a pause in the time between. That must have been somewhere around, I'm going to say, 12:45, 1 o'clock. And then she did not show back up on a security camera till around 1:45 a.m. 1:30 to, okay, I guess it was closer to 1:30. And she's coming back, and the video shows her staggering, having trouble walking and everything. And I don't think she had been injured. I think she had, her boyfriend had told us that she had some beer in that backpack she was carrying. So I don't know if she just went somewhere, sat down along the road and drank more beer, or used some other type of drugs. But clearly she was more intoxicated when she showed up in that video around 1:30. And then there's some more video up until about 2 o'clock, I think. It's kind of sketchy from what actually happened, because they were having problems at the YMCA. This is where the video security camera was. It was shutting down and coming back on.
Motion activated.
Yeah. Lisa just has motion activated, and I think that was part of it too. but there was a gap of, I don't know, 15 minutes, 20 minutes when the camera didn't work at all. And she was behind the Y. It looked like she was back there by a dumpster, and it looked like she was trying to get through a fence. Now, there used to be a hole in that fence. There's still debate to now whether that hole was there or whether it had been repaired. But either way, I think she was going to try to get through that hole in that fence, or somehow over the fence into this apartment complex that was next to the Y. But we don't know for sure because the camera shut off again. And that was the last she was seen, as far as I know, anyway.
What do you make of that? I mean, is there any significance to that apartment that you guys are aware of? Anyone that lives there, or had she been there before that you know about?
We honestly don't know if she knew anyone over there or not. The apartment complex had a reputation as being a pretty bad place for drugs and violent behavior and that type of thing. We don't know if she thought she was going to the other apartment on the other side of the lot. I think that was where Eddie's mother lived, or if she was just
knew somebody there.
Yeah, we don't know, because she was, like I said, and secretive about what she was always doing and who she knew.
And we do know that there was something else at that apartment complex going on that night, or around that time anyway, because I think it was some bank robbery, or that they were.
No, I forget. The police were watching that area. They had a stakeout going on.
Not particularly right at that time.
Yeah, we don't know if it was going on at that time, but that area was under surveillance for somebody that they thought was involved, I believe, in a bank robbery. And we never did get the full story on that. Our detective assigned to the missing person case talked about it, but never gave us a real full explanation of what these other officers had this place under surveillance. But oddly enough, was it a week later or 2 weeks?
Not a week later.
Yeah, it was a week later. There was a homicide there at that apartment. And this guy got killed. And I mean, there's no connection that we could make between.
Sure. But it does beg the question, like, was it not the best area?
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it sort of fills that in for us. Lets you know
Exactly.
the last place she was
wasn't
heading
in a great part of town.
No.
There you go.
Went missing, and she was walking through an alley, and
a woman walking alone at night in any part of town is kind of a dangerous thing.
In the best place.
Yeah, it only increases the red flags, right? When you start to talk about a place like that.
And just to be clear, so people who aren't familiar with the case, your daughter, she was a petite girl, right? She was
114 pounds. Yeah. And
but she was she could put up a fight, and that's the thing. One of the things that worried me is that, rather than, if someone accosted her, I could see her trying to fight her way out of it, and things not going well that way.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, we've come up with all kinds of scenarios of what might have happened, and it's just natural to do it, but we'll never know. I don't believe
what if the police come up with what's, if anything?
Really nothing.
Nothing.
The one thing, like I said, that I was grateful for initially was that in talking to the police detective, what I didn't, because I did not believe at all that Kirsten just took off on her own. But I was afraid that, with her background and her history, that the police might think, she's just taken off. But in talking to the detective about her, and knowing she didn't have really any money, that she had a banking account that she
several thousand dollars in her bank account.
That was never touched. She had a dog that was, really part of, was her life, that was staying, living here with us at the time. I knew that if she was ever she'd plan something. She wouldn't just, and then given her, the way she looked that night, it was like, I knew that she just hadn't decided to take off. So I was grateful that the police detective pretty much agreed with us and didn't ever consider it, give us the idea that she can, wasn't going to look, because she just thought she took off.
Yeah, because there's a bias, especially, we talked about this in our preliminary with you, that there's kind of a bias against adults that go missing, because there's always assumption that, they took off on their own. Now, a lot different, and they tend to get more attention. But with adults, I'm not just talking about the media, I'm talking about the police and law enforcement in general. They don't probably put as much resources toward finding an adult unless there's absolute proof that someone was kidnapped or taken across state lines or what have you.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times we've heard that the initial conversation with the cops is, they're going to show up. They probably don't want to be found right now. And that men and women, they say it about.
Well, and that's why I say I'm grateful that she seemed pretty much from the start ready to believe, that there something happened.
Right.
But
that's great.
They didn't come. She never came up with anything. I mean,
and it seems like you guys thought that too, right? Like at this point in time.
The woman detective at one point, and this was probably, I'm going to say, months into the investigation, or months after she went missing, when we talked to her and asked her what she thought happened to her. And she came right out and says, I think she was probably grabbed by somebody. And, that's about all she would say, because she didn't have any proof to say that, but just based on her own experience and the circumstances and what she knew about Kirsten's situation, she said, I'm afraid that's probably what happened, that she was just grabbed by somebody. And, what happened after that, we'll never know. But, it's definitely the worst parent's nightmare.
Absolutely. I can only imagine what it's like for you guys. Did they ever, through the investigation and obviously questioning people that she may have been with that night and who may have seen her in the places that she went to, was there ever any question about, like, was this connected to someone that she knew versus a random abduction leading to God knows what?
Yeah, and I don't think we ever got into that. Now, we left out what efforts were made to find her. There was a couple of searches made in the area by friends of ours, who kind of, one gal kind of got a group of people together. I forget, this might have been a week or two after she went missing, and canvassed the area, not so much expecting to find her as just asking people if they had seen our daughter, anywhere around there, if they'd seen any suspicious activity. I asked people if they had security cameras that were in that close to that area. Did literally look for anything that might be a clue, or like a phone or her backpack, or piece of clothing in that area. In fact, nothing was found.
Someone did find a phone,
but it
wasn't hers. But they did that search, and then
the police flew
drones,
little drones around, trying to find cameras, trying to find clues.
And actually went out on horseback because of the area back there. It was kind of woody, or
an old couple of drainage ditches with brush growing up along the banks and stuff like that.
So
which would make a good place for somebody to hide a body.
Yeah.
So, but again, there just wasn't much after that, because there just didn't seem to be there was nothing, no clues to kind of grab onto to go forward with.
Well, I was just going to say, has there been a continued effort, or how long did the effort go on? Like, were posters put up? Were more people questioned?
Yeah, we had people that volunteered and put posters up and down a couple of the main streets in the area where she went missing. Washington Street is a main east-west street through Indianapolis. And I know there's these one people, I don't know, and must have went almost all the way downtown, which would have been, several miles away, and posted him on phone poles or utility poles. I know they put up posters in the bar where or flyers in the bar where she went missing.
And then
we did TV shows.
We did
TV
a vigil.
News and, yeah, go ahead.
And I think it was a few months later, but we did a vigil in that area, where we had, some posters up and everything. And our private investigator at that time had gone around to all, to the apartment complexes in the area, putting up posters there for the vigil.
Well, she put a flyer on every door
every door.
Taped up a flyer on every door in that apartment building.
Yeah.
If anyone had seen anything that night or knew anything, no response.
And then we were interviewed by a couple of different TV stations here in town also.
The newspaper, Indianapolis Star, did a pretty lengthy story and covered everything up to that point. So the word got out there, and if you put her name up or on the search engine, you're going to see all kind of stuff popping up. So pretty well known that she's missing, but no one has come forward with any credible evidence of what happened. We've had a few false leads. Some of them, I'm pretty sure, were just intentional hoaxes. Some of them were a little wacky by well-intentioned people, but they turned out to be nothing. And I won't go into all that right now, but sometimes something like this brings out some pretty silly things that people think they can divine out of the air where somebody might be, or use extrasensory ESP or find someone. Yeah. And so you get a little bit of the crazies, but
we've noticed a lot of well-intentioned,
well-meaning.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. They are well-meaning, but maybe a little misdirected.
Yeah.
Can I ask about the folks that she was out with that night? Obviously, I can already tell that the people that view our channel are going to be curious about that angle. So obviously, it seems like they must have probably been interviewed by law enforcement, which is where a lot of this information is coming from. But was there ever a whiff of suspicion? Just because the way that they all parted ways that night was kind of acrimonious, and everyone was a little intoxicated. I mean, was that door kind of closed? Does it remain open? Where are we at with that?
Well, it's kind of like from the beginning, I mostly did not believe that they would have been involved. I had some contact through Facebook Messenger with one of the women that was out that night with them, who was someone who actually knew Kirsten, but from a long time ago, wasn't really friends with her or anything. And, you know, the thing is, she would
She said,
talk with me, like I said, via messenger. And there were a couple of times I said to her, I said, you know, I asked her, I said, would you please, you know, maybe talk with our private investigator who might have some questions that I, you know, might not even think of. And she would say yes. And then our investigator would try to reach her, and she wouldn't answer. And
well, they had conversations. She had interviewed her once.
well, she had
originally.
it. Yes, she had
This
interviewed
is sometime
her once.
afterward.
And I guess the thing is, as time has gone on, I do wonder if there was some involvement. That whole area where Kirsten went missing, like I said, Eddie was staying with his mom in one apartment complex, not the apartment complex that we knew she was seen at, but it was down the block just a little bit. And you know, what we understand happened is the four of them took off in the car, went to a little town called Beech Grove, just south of where they were at, because there's a big bowling alley there. They were closed. So we know that after that, they said it was Olivia's car. Olivia was driving. Olivia took Eddie and this other guy named Jared back to where Eddie was staying with his mother and dropped them off. And then she and this other girl left. You know, in thinking about the time frames, you know, knowing that Kirsten was last seen somewhere around 1:30-ish, 1:45, feeling like they were probably back at Eddie's mom's apartment by then. Again, scenarios that we've played that I've played in my mind is not necessarily that anything was intentional, but Kirsten and Eddie did have a volatile relationship. And, you know, they got into some shoving matches and everything. And, you know, in my mind, one of the scenarios that I could see happening is Kirsten getting a hold of Eddie at his mom's apartment, them getting into it, knocking each other around, knocking her down, maybe hitting her head. You know, that's a scenario that I can see. I do not believe that he ever intentionally would have harmed her in that respect. But I could see something like that happening. Now, whether there's anything to that, like I said, there's just a small part of me that wonders if that's a possibility.
As far as you know, has Eddie, sorry, Rex, has Eddie been questioned by the police?
Well, yes, initially he was, and I think the private investigator talked to him too. But you know, he just basically stuck to the story that we've been telling here, that she made a pest of herself and was obnoxious that night, and they just drove off and left her there. Now, whether they talked about what Lisa just talked about, whether when they came back, did he have any chance to make contact with her again? I don't know anything about whether they questioned, because we've never read the interviews.
Right.
Right. And just so everybody knows, this investigation, this case is still considered active. It's not a cold case, so you wouldn't have access to it. You know, it makes sense.
And like, you know, we may not have access to a lot of stuff we wish we did of what has gone on, and they may have information that they just don't want us to have at this point. You know, I don't know what kind of leads they may have gotten, or what they might be developing even to this day. I don't think they keep anything really important secret away from us. But I don't know that, but we haven't had any contact with the police detective in a while, or our private investigator. And, I take it from that nothing's happening, or they would have called us or contacted us. But,
Right.
her name and DNA profile, and our profile, DNA profiles are on a National Clearinghouse's website. NamUs. I don't know if you heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
MUS, the National. Let's see. Now I got to remember what that stands for.
Yes.
National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. That's what the acronym. It's run by the Justice Department. Well, it's through the I can't remember, one of their subordinate agencies, and in conjunction with the University of North Texas. And it's a big database, of all people that are missing, or all people then put on it that are missing. And they even have unidentified bodies on there with profile or DNA profiles, sometimes photographs, locations where they were found. So, that's something that police investigators and law enforcement uses when they're trying to match somebody up. If they would, for example, find somebody and they weren't readily identifiable, if they could get a DNA sample, they would try to match it against somebody on that database, that NamUs. It's a
Right.
pretty important tool, I believe, for law enforcement when it comes to missing persons.
Absolutely. I feel like you guys have sort of said this in various ways, but what do you think happened?
Well, to put it in a simple language as I can, I think, she was walking down one of them roads and somebody, slowed down and said something to her, and she might have popped off, said something smart, and they might have just jumped out and grabbed her, threw her in her car, and took off with her. And God knows what happened then. I mean, I don't know what else, unless we played around with the idea that maybe she committed suicide. She died by suicide, jumped into a river. Like there's none around there.
Was that something that she struggled with? I mean, was that even a possibility?
I don't think
She
so.
was prone to thinking about that, but
she certainly, had, like I said, she had anger issues. She had some mental health. While she was in high school, I did have her in counseling for a period of time. Um, she was for a short period of time on some medication, but she didn't want to take it. And but I don't think she was ever. I think it was more anger driven than anything. I don't think she was suicidal. That's why I said, I mean, she could put up a fight. And so, yes, somebody trying to grab her, or, I could even see that, somebody could have offered her a ride too, and she might have gone ahead and gotten in the car, and then something happened, but, or, and I could also see where she could have depended on the alcohol and the drugs that she took. I could see her being with someone even under the influence, and maybe actually, having an overdose. And then somebody getting afraid because, of that, and disposing of the body or something.
Right.
That's also something I've wondered about.
Right. At this point, 5 years into this whole experience, do you have hope that you're going to get answers one day?
I've leaned on my faith a lot to get me through this. Uh, I think it's possible, but I think the odds are against it, but I can think of some other missing persons that years later they found remains of a body somewhere, and they were able to get a match, and find out who it belonged to. But then I've also read about parents or loved ones, family that never found out, and they all passed away. Uh, so I don't know at this point. I want to know what happened, but I'm not sure I want to know all the details. I don't know if my emotional state could handle it.
Of course.
Hard thing to think about. I got that call from the police, and they said we've found your daughter's remains somewhere. And
I mean, I would like to have her back in whatever way we can. But yes, again, as we get, the older that we get, and I guess I'm more coming to find or think that I may never know before I pass away.
Can I ask you guys, is there a reward? Is there any incentive out there?
We put out a $10,000 reward for any information that would lead to her being found.
And it's still
out there.
It's still there. I mean, we would still honor.
But that's good to know, because, I think, a lot of times what can happen is that somebody's conscience gets shook, loose, or, somebody drinks too much and tells the wrong person something they know, or, somebody gets out of a relationship and decides they want to be vindictive against the person that they were in a relationship with who had told them something. I mean, these things do happen. We've seen it before.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I guess that's what our best hope is, that right now, is that we know there's somebody out there that knows something. Even if it could, even anonymously, if someone was afraid of coming forward, even to collect the reward, because it put the, in naming somebody that was involved. We just want to know. We just would like to know where she is, and have her back.
Yep. Yeah,
Of course.
just to get some peace of mind for you guys and put things to rest, I would imagine.
Well, if somebody seeing this has information or a tip, or there's any good that can come of it, where should they take that? Is there a particular tip line or police department that you want us to drive them to? Because we always do that at the end of these episodes. We try to give people somewhere to go.
The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department.
I'm trying to find their phone number here. The Missing Persons Department.
You guys can send it to us and we'll put it up in a graphic.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah. And even our still, possibly even our private investigator, like I said, we still believe we have one. We just don't know. I mean, there's just been no real contact recently with them.
Right. Well, get us all the info, email it to us, and we will put it up at the end of this and make sure people have a place to go. And then as far as if people want more information on Kirsten's story too, maybe if there's anything, like you said, like a Facebook or anywhere at all where they can get more info, we'll put that up as well.
Internet, more than I ever expected there to be, because people are, I guess, fascinated by these types of stories. I never thought I'd be part of it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's also, Rex, there's a lot of people who have similar stories, and these communities sort of form, unfortunately, but it's for the good, right? But it's unfortunate that they have.
And I want to thank both you guys for highlighting this story. I really.
Oh no, thank you guys for being so open with us.
Good may come of it.
Yeah,
somebody might pass on some information that'll help get her found.
that's why,
I hope so.
as this is,
Yeah, you see me squirming around here and sweating because it does. It's not just nervousness of being on a podcast. It's just having to relive some of this stuff.
Oh, I never thought that
Yeah.
we were making you nervous. I think I understood your body language for what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you guys are really, it's very commendable what you're doing. Obviously, you want answers, and this is not something you'd probably want to be doing with your time otherwise. So I know we're not having this conversation for fun. We're doing it for Kirsten.
And I understand.
But we appreciate what you're doing, and
more than you know, believe me.
Like I said, even if it's not with us, any of these programs, if any information can get back to help any family, that's great.
That's the hope.
Absolutely.
That's the hope. Well, Rex and Lisa, thank you both so much for taking the time to talk to us. And we're going to stay in touch with you, of course, as we move through all this process. But you guys are a wonderful, wonderful family. And I'm so sorry for your situation right now. I hope you get some answers.
Thank you.
Hey, Sean, you too, Miles. Appreciate your time.
Yep.
No, it was great to see you guys.
Great to see you. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, well, we'll stay in touch then. Thank you both.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
And bye-bye.
What really stood out to me, I don't know about you, Sean, but what really stood out to me was when we started talking about the ex, obviously, and the fact that he was there that night, the fact that, he had said specifically that she had been acting up and that he left, that they had had this volatile history, that we knew that he was staying somewhere fairly close to where she was seen. Not necessarily that building that she was kind of like, sneaking around the back of or whatever, but, in the area. Without anything else to go on, that's obviously, I think, something that our audience is going to pick up on. And it's something that I can't help think about.
Yeah, and that's why I kind of returned to it after we had been talking for a while, because it's just always either bad luck or significant. When the last people that a missing person has an interaction with, it's like a bad one, right? Where, like in Liam Toman's case, he's getting kicked out of a bar or being told not to talk to some women. It's hard not to think about that. And in this case, it's difficult to imagine that, Kirsten's final interactions with people were so ugly that they left her behind at a bar. And so it's like, is that just
Right.
an unfortunate coincidence that later that night she would go missing? Or was there something so wrong there that it's worth digging into a little bit more to figure out, was that really it or not? And we don't know at this point, but yeah, hard not to notice.
I think agreed. And I think I have to do a little more research myself to see if there's anyone else, that she may have had some issues with or something that maybe is out there with a little more digging without the family knowing. Because this might be worth doing a little bit of a deep dive, like a kind of suspect in theory vid, like we've done on some other cases. But I mean, it also might just be completely random and just a horrible, horrible thing that happened. And she's just, look, somebody said, I think one of the comments that we reacted to a couple of weeks ago was, mentioned getting beamed up, about the young men in the ski resorts just getting beamed up into a spaceship. And, this feels very similar. I mean, there's no trace, nothing's been found. None of her items, personal items or, DNA evidence, nothing. She just vanished.
And I think we talked about that on that comment a couple weeks ago, saying that, when someone appears to have be beamed up, a lot of times it's probably because somebody made it look that way, and I have a bad feeling
Right.
about that here. Because if you
Right.
look at her situation that night, it's basically what every parent or teacher or whatever when you're a kid tells you not to do. Don't be out alone at night. Don't be in unfamiliar places. Don't be overly intoxicated if you're going to do either of those
By
things.
yourself. Yeah.
By
I mean,
yourself.
she kind of broke every rule. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hate to say it because we're not blaming Kirsten at all. Obviously, she's most likely a victim in whatever happened here, but
Mm-hmm.
there are things you can do that put yourself at risk, and that looks to me from the outside like a very risky night for her, and it seems like it ended poorly.
Yeah. All
That
right.
being
Well,
said, yeah, I hope they get some answers. I mean, it seems like somebody in that area knows. She was on foot the whole time. You have to think someone,
yeah. Someone saw something and somebody knows something. Well, to be continued, right?
To be continued. Well, thank you guys for tuning in for another one. We're excited to hear your thoughts on this. So weigh in the comments, and we'll, as usual, get back to you on all of that stuff. So excited to hear what you think.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody.